Hello, this is Andrés with the Sangeet School Introduction to Western Music video series. In this video we're going to talk about music during the Renaissance, which was a time of great change in Europe and the rise of the influence of the classical Greek and Roman worlds. And then we'll wrap up the discussion by talking about a brand new genre of music called the Madrigal. So first off, a little gallery to get an introduction to the Renaissance. This is a printing press, which was invented in the early 1500s by a German man called Johannes Gutenberg. It kind of revolutionized the spread of information. Now you can just fix the movable type and print off a bunch of copies of the same thing, the same book. This benefited a lot of writers like Shakespeare. And also benefited composers a lot, because now they, instead of making these complicated manuscripts, they can just print off a lot of copies. It's also a time of great change. As we know, Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492, so that interchange of ideas and materials between the New World and the Old World was also very important during the Renaissance. And also extremely important is the rise of humanism. Now, during the medieval period, if you recall, there was a lot of talk about the Catholic Church and the role of the Church in everyday life, and how the Church was the main location for music, for preservation of music as well. But now we have this idea of humanism, which says that the secular part of life is also important. Just everyday life, church doesn't have to be involved in everything. For example, this painting is called The School of Athens. It's by Raphael. And we also see this, The Birth of Venus, which not only is not it's not a painting about Christian values or anything, but it's a painting of a pagan Roman goddess. And we'll see this general idea of secularism and humanism start to show up in music too. The power and the position of the Catholic Church is also challenged during this period by the rise of the Protestant Reformation, led by this man, Martin Luther. So now, instead of just the Catholic Church, you also have Protestants. And during this time period we also get the idea of the Renaissance man, for example Leonardo da Vinci, who studied a lot of biology and also did engineering kinds of things, and was also, of course, a very famous painter with the Mona Lisa. So there's our very quick introduction to the Renaissance. And now we will talk about Josquin. He just goes by the one name. And the interesting thing about him is that even though he was far and away the most famous composer during the middle of the Renaissance, later Palestrina was also famous, but he was the guy during this time period. We don't know a lot about his life. We don't even know exactly when he was born or where he was born. We think it was around the year 1450 and somewhere near the modern-day French and Belgian border, but we don't know exactly. We do know during his life he lived in Milan and France, and that he worked for quite some time with both the French King Louis XII and a family called Ferrara in Italy. And we also suspect he was a little snarky. He wrote a motet, a song, when the French king owed him money, essentially letting him know, "Remember thy promise to thy servant." And the French king took the hint and paid him in full, at which point Josquin wrote another motet, something along the lines of, "You have served thy servant well." But now let's talk briefly about his works. Even though the power of the Catholic Church was diminished during this time period, it remained an important part of life, and a lot of composers still wrote masses. We'll talk about these kinds of masses in a second. And motets, which were also generally religious songs at this point. And he also wrote a lot of chansons, which is just French for songs, and these were more secular. So let's talk about these masses. So a cantus firmus mass is when you take a pre-existing piece of music that's just one voice. You could write one on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, for example, and then you write a mass around that. A parody mass is almost exactly the same thing, except that it is a pre-existing piece of music with two voices or more voices, could be four voices. We're going to listen to a little bit of a cantus firmus mass that he wrote. This is a song called L'Homme Armé, which is the man at arms, which was stupendously famous and well used at this point. Something like 40 different masses were written using this cantus firmus.
L'homme armé, l'homme armé, l'homme armé, doit-on douter? On a fait partout crier que chacun se veigne armé.
So it's pretty catchy. You can see why people would want to write on it. And Josquin actually wrote two masses based on this theme, but we're going to listen to just one of them right now. Again, this is the Mass L'Homme Armé, if you want to go look for it. And that is a very quick and dirty introduction to Josquin. The motets he wrote led in many ways to this new genre called Madrigals. And these are secular songs that a lot of composers started to write in the late Renaissance. And they tended to use this technique called word painting, in which the music tries to literally follow what the words are saying. I'll play you an example by an English composer of the time, Thomas Weelkes, called As Vesta Was From Latmos Hill Descending, so you can see what I mean.
As Vesta was from Latmos Hill descending, First two by two, then three by three, then three by three together, leaving their goddess all alone. Hasten thither, and mingling with the shadow.
Okay, so you get the idea of what a madrigalism is. Madrigalism or word painting, very common technique during this time period. And that is a very quick introduction to Renaissance music. And next video we will talk about the Baroque. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.